As mentioned before, we do have Casey Kennedy here from the OCA, as well as a few additional Tyler folks. Joining me is Matt Weigel, who is our senior product manager for Research Texas, as well as April Scott, who is our product owner for eFile Texas and the self-help version of eFile Texas. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started, but I believe, Casey, you wanted to review the agenda before we got underway.
Yeah. Thank you, Terry. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's got a nice cup of coffee and a blanket for this wet, cold weather that's outside, and I'm fairly confident it's covering most of the state. So it's the same at your place as it is ours here in Austin, and I'm sure our friends up in Dallas are the same way at Tyler. Cold and trying to keep warm. So first of all, thank you guys for jumping on this webinar. We're going to go do a overview of research, and so it's just basically what it is. We're going to go over some of the recent actions that have just taken place recently. The Supreme Court has put out an order, and so we'll be talking about that. Then we'll talk about research, in particular, role-based security, which talks about how security will work with the different kinds of users on research, how registered users would register, the fees they're going to be charged with Research Texas, who they go to, what they are, how you all as the clerk team can go in and seal cases, filings, and documents. There's multiple ways to do that. Same with expungements. And then also some of the reporting, because obviously when money and transactions are going back and forth, there needs to be some reporting. Then after we're done with that, we'll turn it over to April to do a nice little demo on some of the redaction services. This is something that OCA has recently contracted with Tyler to turn on for several of the platforms that we have with them. And we'll be giving an overview and a quick demo and some of the targeted elements that redaction is looking for. And then after that, we'll go over the implementation schedule of all this and some important dates surrounding that. And again, that's why we've got y'all on the webinar, so we can make sure that you guys know these dates. And then finally, we'll leave time at the end to do questions and answers so that you all can ask questions. One of the other things that I'd encourage you to do is on the webinar, there's the ability for you all to ask questions. And I would encourage you to do that because we can see all your questions. And when we get those questions, just be mindful that we may find a way to weave it into the presentation. So if I see a question pop up and I'm already talking about it, I'll go ahead and answer it. If I see a question that I know the answer is 4 slides down, I may just leave it because I know we'll answer it later on. Or if it's a big philosophical question that we don't cover that there needs to be discussion around, we may hold it to the end for the Q&A section of the webinar. But in any case, please, please, please feel more than welcome to ask questions. I know that speaking for at least myself, probably the Tyler guys too, you're welcome to ask questions. You may or may not like the answer that we have, but at least we can get that out on the table and get those questions going. So with that, I'll turn it over to Terry to do the next slide, which is an overview of research.
Great, thank you, Casey. So I just wanted to make sure that we started off with a good foundation. We level set with this audience because we will use the foundation of this slide to build out the remaining talking points of the presentation. So first and foremost, what is Research Texas? Research Texas is a Supreme Court initiative to provide a single unified court document search solution that spans all courts across the state. It's a web-based remote access solution to electronic court records and documents for the following: for judges, for clerks, for attorneys on the case, all 3 of those roles which were previously defined by the rules and the policy of the Supreme Court. And then now we're rolling into some additional stakeholders, which would include licensed attorneys and registered users. We'll speak more about that and provide you a little bit more information here on the coming slides. What it does include is the documents accepted in the civil cases through eFile Texas, civil meaning non-criminal. What it does not include is criminal cases, the documents that are filed in the traditional over-the-counter method via paper by self-represented litigants, civil expungements, those cases that are filed as a civil expungement case to expunge a criminal case, and then of course non-disclosure cases as well. Documents that are downloaded from research will have a watermark, and that the watermark will be at the bottom of the document, and it will be labeled copied from research texts as illustrated here on this slide. The case information, you'll hear us refer to that pretty frequently throughout this presentation as the metadata, and documents aren't available for bulk download. And we've put some safeguards in place to prevent any authorized user from going in and downloading those records in bulk. And it does not require clerks to shut down their existing public access or document access solution. So if you've got iDocket that you're using to share your documents, you can continue to do that. If you've got a case management system application that acts as that public access system, like a portal system for your case management solution, that can continue to run concurrently with research. With that, I'll pass it back over to Casey to go through some recent actions that have occurred to get us to where we are today.
Thank you, Terry. We did have a question come up asking if family and probate cases are considered civil for this project, and the answer is yes. And so, and we'll get into some of the security later on, because obviously those cases have a little bit more sensitive information than just your run-of-the-mill case. So some of the more recent actions that have taken place, some of you may or may not know the Judicial Committee on Information Technology. This is a group that was appointed by the Supreme Court in '97, and obviously people roll on and roll off of that group. But it's a good group of what I call our court stakeholders, which include judges, clerks, attorneys, the technologists. These guys are there to promote the standardization and to make things flow smoothly with technology in the court world. They do meet about quarterly. Their schedule's online on the website that we have linked, and those meetings are open. So if you're in the Austin area, you're more than welcome to come in and participate. And it's a very collaborative kind of environment generally. So some of the more recent actions that have taken place with research, back in January of 2016, JCIT unanimously endorsed the plan to go ahead and roll out research, the platform that we're talking about today. And at that time, OCA had Tyler turn on collecting documents. So they started collecting documents back in early 2016. Then in 2017, JCIT recommended to both high courts to go ahead and adopt roles 1, 2, and 3, which are a security role for judges, another role for clerks, and then role 3 is attorneys that are on the case. So those are the active attorneys for that case. A month later, the Supreme Court adopted those recommendations, and they put in an administrative order for OCA to go ahead and implement, which we took almost the rest of the year to go ahead and implement that. And back in January, we had those roles implemented. Then back in June of this year, JCIT recommended to the Supreme Court and Court of Criminal Appeals to go ahead and adopt 2 new roles, which is role 4, which we call that licensed attorneys or attorneys not on the case, and then role 5, registered users, which is synonymous with the general public, and then their associated permissions, because obviously the judges can see everything, clerks can see everything, attorneys on the case can see their cases, but there's security around attorneys that are not on a case but are still attorneys, and then even more security around the registered users. And then this month, about 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, the Supreme Court adopted JCIT's recommendations to expand to roles 4 and 5 and ordered OCA to go ahead and implement those. The next slide, Terry.
All right, thanks, Casey. The next thing that we'll do is we'll run through the role-based security aspect with regards to the different role descriptions that Casey outlined on the previous slide. This will give us a better understanding of which users may have access to which data within research. So The very first three are ones that were previously approved by the rules, but just for the sake of making sure we're all in sync before we proceed, we would like to review that with this audience. The first one being judges. The judges description really is any judge with the exception of JP judges, municipal court judges. And that group will have access to all of the data that we've captured since we've been instructed to back in January of 2016, and we'll have access to see that information. The second group is attorneys on the case, any attorney that may be representing a party on that record, as well as visiting judges. The attorney on the case is really defined as means an attorney licensed in the state of Texas who has made an appearance on that case. And the visiting judge definition means that a qualified judge assigned to a specific case or docket for a temporary period. This audience will have the information back since January 1 of 2016 for everything on their respective cases. The third role is the clerks. This is really any of the elected officials as well as their deputy clerks and staff that are needed to perform specific clerk duties. Again, they would follow pretty much the exact same, which is back from January 1 of 2016, have access to everything within their own respective jurisdictions. The two new rules that were recently approved by the Supreme Court is rule number 4, rule number 4, licensed attorney. This is any attorney that's licensed in the state of Texas but does not fall into one of the 3 previous roles that were mentioned. You can consider this any barred attorney in the state that is accessing data that they are not an attorney of record on. What they'll have access to is back to January 1 of 2016 as officers of the court and have access to everything that's not sealed and or not restricted. Registered users is role number 5. From role number 5, what the registered user will be is any user that does not fall into the previous 4 roles. So if anyone registers with our system, we'll have a information about that respective user, but if they don't fall in to one of the 4 previous roles, they will naturally fall into this registered user. They will have information beginning on November 1st of this year moving forward, and it would include everything that's not sealed per the security matrix, which we will discuss here in the coming slides. The important thing to remember about who has access to what is the vantage point in which they are logging into the system and viewing those records is important. Users getting into the system with either a specific role will define how they are able to see information and in what capacity they would be able to do that with. So an example is users that are accessing the system with a clerk role, which was defined on a previous slide, will possess access to more information than those who are accessing the system with a registered user role. In addition to that, attorneys' access privileges will transition frequently between attorneys on a case, which is role number 2, and licensed attorney, which is role number 4, depending upon the case that they're trying to access. So if they're the lead attorney or an attorney of record on that case, they will get the access in role number 2. If they're just a licensed attorney that's not affiliated with that case, they will get access in consistency and in alignment with role number 4. In order to help provide better clarity on what this means and what they would have access to, the Office of Court Administration has set up some dummy accounts. Fake accounts is another way to say that for the clerks to utilize, which will allow for them to see different vantage points. So if you log into the system utilizing your current eFile Texas Research Texas login credentials, you'll have access to view the case and data information for your respective location using your clerk role. But if you'd like to log in as a licensed attorney and or a registered user, there are some credentials here that you can log in as in order to get access to the system in that capacity. We've included a link to the Research Texas system below. So when we send out this presentation, you should be able to use that in order to access the system and then be able to see how that looks from those respective vantage points. All right. Digging into the access security model and what that looks like, the access security matrix is a document that is included in the JCIT technology standards and goes through the roles and permissions that could be found within each one of those respective roles. Casey, I don't know if you wanted to lead with this one and
Sure. So with this, there's a link here to the JCIT technology standards. There's also available online. And so JCIT worked basically most of 2018 on the security matrix. And what they did is, you'll notice if you go through it that the case categories and case types match up with what people would electronically file those cases as. And then in it, you can see what metadata will show and what images or documents will show for any particular case category and case type. And the big thing to keep in mind is this is only for that role 5 of registered user. So think of John Q. Public registering. And so like on this slide, you can kind of see civil, other civil, administrative appeal, all the case meta information, the index information, and the documents associated with that case would be available to the general public that are go through Role 5 registered user. But then when you look down at communicable disease, that's one that they won't even see that there's a case for. And so this kind of details what it is that the Role 5 users would see. There's another column called delay that will say the number of days from the time it was accepted as a filing until it can be seen. This is predominantly used in family cases later on down the road. You'll see those to where those get delayed to where even after the clerk accepts the documents, they won't show up on research for another month. And then in a lot of the family cases where there are minor names in the style, you'll see the word restyle, and when that happens, then the case will be restyled party 1 versus party 2 instead of whatever the existing style. Any style changes that you see in research, those will not impact your CMS. So you all, from the clerk level, you get to continue to do what you do with those cases.
All right.
Then, let's see. So the other thing is with the licensed attorney. So the security matrix provides for the Role 5. However, for just licensed attorneys, there are certain things that they're excluded from as well. And so JCIT went through and was looking at statute to see what else was restricted from licensed attorneys. And in their definition, they're restricted by anything by court order, rule, or statute, including documents that are unredacted or have sensitive information. And so for Role 4, they'll be excluded from seeing these case types that you've got listed on the screen. And there is an exception, and it's from Harris County. There's statute that talks about counties with a population over 3.4 million, of which there is one today, that there are some family cases that you'll see that are delayed 31 days for registered users. Those will also be delayed by 31 users, or by 31 days from licensed attorneys as well.
All right. Thanks, Casey. So we'd like to spend just a moment to walk you through how to register for SearchTX. Registered users will register using the same process as eFile Texas. So if you're familiar with that, you should be in good shape. But for those of you who may not be, we would like to walk through that. The very first thing you do is set up your name, your email, and your password, and you can do that by registering in the system. When you do register in the system, it will send you an email to the email address that you've registered with. That way you can verify that email link and verify that that is indeed your email address. From there, then you'll be asked to agree to the terms and conditions of the solution, and then followed by entering in your contact information. This would be able to identify who you are and ensure that we know the users that are logging into the system for validation purposes. And finally, you would be asked to enter in or verify payment information. This would give you the ability to enter in your method of payment if you were going to purchase documents from the solution.
Hey, Terry, this is Matt. Just want to make a quick note that if you're already an existing eFile Texas user that you don't need to register again for research, you can go ahead and sign in using your existing eFile Texas login credentials. And that's same for the existing filers in eFile Texas. So what you're seeing here are for brand new users who have never used either eFile Texas or Research Texas.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. So the payment information is important because those users who would like to go in and purchase documents through the system will need to enter that information in so that we can capture the payments for those fees. Speaking of those fees, anyone who is either in a Role 4, a licensed attorney, or a Role 5 registered users would be required to pay a fee in order to view the documents. They'll have access to the case metadata, the index, if you will, for that case record, but in order to pull back the documents and view them within that record, they do need to pay a fee. The document purchase fee has been set by the Supreme Court at 10 cents per page with a max of $6 per document. When someone purchases the documents, it remains available to them for download for 30 days on Research Texas. After those 30 days expire, the document will no longer be available for them to download. And if they would like to access it again, they would need to repurchase that document. The county where the document originates, the custodian of that record will receive 100% of the document purchase revenue. That means that the money that's collected for selling your documents will be given back to you in a following date deposit, which we will describe on the coming slides. The hope is that the audience that we will be bringing to the table with this research solution will be much broader than your local audience that you have today, which generates additional interest in those documents and case records, and hopefully then increases the revenue for each one of the counties across the state. So fees, digging in a little deeper, we will collect the document purchase funds during the day. We will then turn around and distribute those funds to the county or the office, I should say, where those cases reside the following morning. So you would get that the next day. When e-filing was set up, if you guys remember, we had to set up merchant IDs for our eFile Texas money that was collected within that program. But that information was not kept by Tyler Technologies. We passed that information on to Chase Payment Tech and allowed them to create those merchant IDs. So we're going to have to go through the process again of acquiring the bank account information to set up those nightly or following morning ACH transfers to the account of your choice. If no banking information is provided to us, then we won't be able to then distribute those funds to you. So those funds from the document purchase transactions would have to be kept in our account, a holding account, until we can get that information from you. Once the information has been provided to us, then the county office should be able to expect those monies to begin coming in within about 3 business days. We will share with you a little bit later the timeline that it would be required in order to provide us with that information, so that on day 1 you can begin getting that money distributed to your account. The information that we would need in order to do that is the account number and the routing number for that respective account. You can provide that to us in either of the 2 forms, a voided check and or a bank letter confirming your account is in good standing. Either one of those will work and allow for us to be able to deposit those funds into the account of your choice. Moving on from fees, there are 2 different models. I think I'm hopeful that the majority of this audience is familiar with these 2. We've covered them on several occasions in numerous conferences, webinars, presentations, etc. But for the sake of keeping everybody on the same page, we will review them again. There is a repository model and an integrated model. In the repository model, the metadata and copies of the filings, another word of filings is documents, are sent from eFile Texas to Research Texas upon clerk acceptance. The integrated model is a little different. We are sending the metadata, but we are not sending the documents. Instead, we would be sending the document IDs of those filings from eFile Texas to Research Texas upon clerk acceptance, and the documents would continue to be continue to live and remain in the case management system and/or document management system of your choice. In the integrated model, it does provide a series of benefits. Some of those would include changes made in the case management system are immediately reflected within Research Texas. That means that the records are maintained in your case management system but are accurately represented within Research Texas. The case and document security would be directed by your case management system. So making security changes within that system of record will be able to then pass that information to research so that we could then replicate that within the research system. This eliminates the need to update two systems and essentially gives you a single point of record management and ensures the accuracy of that information. Just in case you happen to forget to go into research and do it, the system would automatically do that for you. Kelly Smith, you asked, are you going to send a form for us to respond to in order to submit financial information to obtain payments for those copies? Sure, we will create a document that we can then send you that would have that in there and get you started on that. But if you send us just the other one of the other two options, that would suffice as well. But yeah, we'll send you a document out to kind of initiate that process and tell you where to send that information so that we can get that going fast. Thank you for the question, Kelly. Continuing on with just some of the integration benefits, we touched on it briefly on the previous slide, but really it saves you time and effort. Research automatically will reflect those changes in the case management system, which would include changes to a case and or document security. Any deletions or expunctions of cases would then also be automatically passed in. Changes to party or attorney information, and of course adding new filings, cases and or documents that don't go through eFile Texas. Think final judgments, orders, and things of that nature. You do also get the benefit of avoiding stale data. When a user requests a document from research, instead of having a copy of that document upon when it was accepted by the clerk, we would actually have the most recent version of that document. So if it's changed by any way, we would have whatever that latest and greatest is to be able to share back out with that filing community member who made that request. And then, of course, we would improve the potential for document revenue sales for the county office by being able to offer some non-e-file documents, things like judgments, orders by the court, and even have the capacity to import historical records if you'd like to go back further in time before the dates that are allowed per the rules and policies. So in order to get integrated, the next steps would essentially be to contact your case management system provider and ask them to integrate with Research Texas. It's a pretty simple process, and we do leverage the same APIs that we do for eFile Texas. So if you are integrated with eFile Texas, there are a couple of two new APIs that they would need to use in order to make some of those requests to get the document and do some of the actions that are required within research. But it isn't of the same level of complexity or effort that was required in order to establish the integration with eFile Texas. So if your CMS vendor is already built in the integration with eFile Texas, reach out to them and ask them about the integration with research, and we can start that process, and that would initiate that. If you have Tyler's case management system, just simply submit an eFile Texas support ticket and request to be integrated, and that would initiate that process. The second one is integration activities and duration. Just to kind of level set or set those expectations, after a short kickoff call to review the integration process with you and your staff, you would expect some minor CMS configuration changes, as well as testing within the research stage environment to verify that the integration is functioning as expected. The minor CMS configuration changes would be defined by that CMS. So if you have, the CMS has the capability of automatically promoting records or information that bypasses the e-file system, you would be setting that up. If that's a manual process, then it likely would just be a training opportunity on how to manually upload that information via the integration for your respective CMS. Upon confirmation, we'll work with your CMS vendor to establish the integration and transition that over to our production environment and essentially bring you live. You should expect a few business days to complete this process once you've given us the green light that testing went well in stage and you're ready to move that into production. The expectations then after you transition into that integrated model is you no longer have to manage your cases in research using manual tools, which Matt will walk us through here shortly. And then when a user requests a document for your respective court location, we're going to retrieve the document directly from your CMS as opposed to housing those within the research system. And pause for just a second before I pass it over to Matt. The question is from Cynthia, if a person files an answer pro se over the counter, will that be viewable? Really, that's really a great question, Cynthia, and it's going to be determined by whether or not you have either A, built the integration in, or B, uploaded using the manual tools in that repository model. And I think Matt can probably elaborate on that question a little bit more.
Yeah, hey Cynthia. So whenever you integrate, you can specify the types of cases that you want to tell research about. So if you wanted research to know about a pro se filing on a certain case, then that's set up whenever you do configuration. Also, you could say there's certain case types that I do not want to automatically promote new documents and filings into research, and then research will not receive those.
All right, great. Thanks, Matt. The next thing that we want to go through is how to seal information in our system. And I'm going to pass it over to Matt and let him walk us through that process.
Thanks, Terry.
You're welcome.
So like Terry mentioned before, there's a lot of great benefits from integrating. One of the most important things is the amount of time and management that you're not required to do within research in order to seal a case or a document. Whenever you integrate, whenever you seal a case or a document in your CMS, that will transfer automatically over into research. And research will effectively respect the security settings that you have in your CMS. And we've got a really good implementation guide and a team that can help you set up your integration. And research also provides manual tools that will allow the clerk to be able to manage security on different data elements. So you can mark things as confidential. You can mark a confidential case, a filing, or as we call it, event. You can also mark specific items on a case as being confidential or sealed, hidden from a registered user and a licensed attorney, and I'm going to demo how to do that. And here's an example. Anytime you see these three dots when you're signed in as Research Clerk Administrator, you'll have additional abilities that are not available to any other user. And then here is the ability where you could mark an individual filing as confidential. Whenever you see these red blocks, that indicates to you as a clerk that this item is hidden from a licensed attorney user and a registered user. All right. So you can also delete individual items using the clerk manual tools such as filings and documents. And you can also replace things such as filings or documents. So what I'm going to do now is sign into our Research Texas stage environment. On my computer, Terry, is it looking like I'm displaying the correct?
Yes.
Yes, you are, Matt.
All right, thanks. So what I'm signed in now as a regular clerk administrator, this is what your dashboard looks like. What I'm going to do is click on this example case and show you around some of these manual tools. So this is a case details page. Okay, the case information is at the top, and then I can see I've got some additional items up here. So on the right, if I hover over this red lock, this is telling me that this case is marked as confidential. So again, this isn't seen by a licensed attorney or a registered user. And what I can do here is click on these three dots, and then I've got some additional options which are below this line. I could edit this case. So if I wanted to, I could click edit and then change this case's status, for example. I could change it from open to closed. And I could also, let's say, add an additional judge. Let's say Judge Mathis. All right. So I'm going to save this, and then it's going to be a page refresh, and then my changes are going to be reflected here. So now Judge Mathis is here, and this case status is closed. I also want to pause to say that research, if you are not integrated, research will still take its cues or its direction from eFile Texas. So whenever eFile Texas gets an update, if you're only integrated through eFile Texas, those changes will also be reflected in research. So research tries to get the most up-to-date information, whether that be from the eFile Texas or from your CMS. And then finally, as another measure, we've also added these additional tools. So here's your ability to mark this item as non-confidential. If you click that, it's going to remove that red box. So this case will be searchable and findable by licensed attorneys and registered users. I also want to show you some other cool reports that you get access to as a clerk admin. So you will be able to see the change log on this case. If you click that, it's going to show you all of the changes that have happened to this case, when it happened, and then how it happened. So you notice that we've made some changes to make this case visible to the public, and I updated the case information, and it's listing the clerk admin within my office that did that. And if I scroll down, I can see that we had a case update, and it came from eFile Texas. You're also able to export this, which opens up an Excel file if you'd like to take this report elsewhere. So we have a lot of auditing in Research Texas. We also have a viewer log. So this will show you the number of times a specific user has viewed this case and the last viewed date. So if you needed to see who has viewed this case, if it was unsealed for a certain amount of time, you need to follow up with that certain audience if you wanted to. We wanted to provide you a complete list of everyone who has ever viewed this case. So I'm going to scroll down, and we're going to go to the parties section. I've got two parties here. One of the tools that you can do within research is you can add attorneys to parties. So the reason you might want to do that is whenever an attorney goes through a registration process in Research Texas, we provide them with every case where they are listed as an attorney. So if you want that person to get access, that attorney to get access to their case in research, they need to be listed as an attorney. I mentioned before that Research Texas does get updates from eFile Texas, so as long as that attorney is being added in eFile Texas, they will automatically appear here. Whenever you search for an attorney, you can search by their name or their attorney number. So what I'm going to do is search for my last name, and I'm going to select this attorney. Okay. I'm already on that party. So I'm going to demonstrate another tool that you have, which is the ability to remove this attorney. Okay. Whenever you attempt to delete or remove something, we always make sure to ask, are you sure? So that way you don't accidentally do something like remove this attorney. Removing an attorney is not so bad, so you can always undo that. But if you want to remove an attorney, we ask, are you sure? And if you click remove, it's going to remove that attorney. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and add that attorney back here. And I'm going to pause. Looks like we've got a question from Amanda. Are clerk deputies with eFile admin the only clerk deputies that can edit case information and research? That's right. So if you're already a court admin within eFile Texas, then whenever you sign into Research Texas, you're given that clerk admin role. If you are a reviewer within eFile Texas, then you are a clerk within Research Texas. So if you'd like to be a clerk admin in Research Texas, you need to be marked as a court admin in eFile Texas. And if you have any questions on how to do that, you can reach out to our staff, and then we can either show you how to make those changes yourselves or help you make that change for you. Okay, so that's how you can add and remove attorneys to this case. And then finally, I'm going to show you this filing section. So we've got two filings. I've got one motion, one petition, and I've got one document here, a description, and I can see it's got a case information, document security of non-confidential. So if I want, I can say, well, I want all this case to be visible to licensed attorneys, but I want this specific document, I want to mark it as confidential. So a licensed attorney would be able to see that this filing exists, but they would not be able to preview or purchase this document. I'm going to go ahead and undo that, mark as non-confidential. Also, you can say I want to hide or mark this filing as confidential. So we support lots of different levels of document, filing, and case security. You can always undo that by clicking here. And then we also have some tools for adding. So let's say that you wanted to add a specific filing that was done over the counter. So I'm just going to add one that said example. And I can also enter a filing description, but I'm going to do a basic one here. And now I'm going to add a document, which is going to allow me to grab a PDF from my computer. So I'm going to ask Terry to, oh, I think I lost my, here we go. Is that an example? Sure. How about that? All right, thank you. So here, you also have the ability to change this document's name or description, and then if you want to mark that case, this document is confidential, you can do that there. So I'm just going to hit OK. All right, and then our filings refresh, and then that document appears. So one thing we're kind of hinting at right here is this redaction in progress. We'll go through that later, but we also have the ability to perform auto redaction or manual redaction on documents that you upload in research. So I finally want to show you the ability to delete. Let's say that you needed to remove a filing or a document from research. Here's how you do that. So you click on these three dots, and then you click on delete document. So before, remember, we said we always warn you when removal. So we say, hey, are you really sure you'd like to delete that? If you say yes, we're going to go ahead and delete that document from this filing. Similarly, you could delete an entire filing. So if you click delete filing, we're going to delete that filing for you. All right, we've got a question from Amanda. If integrated between Research Texas and CMS, if you remove or add an attorney in Research Texas, will it integrate into your CMS? Likewise, because you're integrated, any changes in Odyssey will reflect in Research Texas. So your CMS will always tell Research what the case information should be. So right now, Research listens to your CMS, but it does not make any changes in your CMS. So if I were to delete those things in Research, it's not going to remove those things in your CMS. It's just your CMS tells Research what to do.
And if I could just add one more piece to that, the purpose of the integration is to establish the link between your system of record and Research. So you'll always want to make those changes within your case management system. That's the beauty of the integration, is you won't have to do a lot of these manual tools or processes that Matt is walking through when integrated. I do want to put a little notation on that and do say that the CMS that's built in, the integration that's built in with the CMS may vary between CMS to CMS. So you'll just need to, we'll need to work together with your CMS provider to make sure that how they're updating that information is consistent with what we're saying here.
Thanks, Terry. So I want to mention finally that these changes have all been logged like expected. And one other thing that you can do as a clerk admin in Research is you can specify your clerk's office contact information, and whenever you do that, it puts a link at the top of all of your cases in Research so that if a licensed attorney or registered user wants to, they can find out contact information by clicking on the link of this case information. So I'll show you how to set that up. Here I can see a link to the clerk's office website, a phone number, and then the physical address and date and time. So I'm going to jump back to our dashboard. I'm going to open up this menu and then show you what you have access to. It says Clerk Admin. If you click here, you have the ability to change the settings on your clerk's office contact information. And then it'll show you all the locations that you have access to That's based on e-file Texas. And right now I'm signed in as a clerk admin that has access to all of the locations, but what you would do is select your location, and again, you're only going to have access to, say, Aransas County if you're a clerk in Aransas. And then you can enter your clerk's office name, website, contact information. And on the right is an example that'll help kind of guide you to enter your information. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pull back up our PowerPoint. And then if you have any other integration or manual tool related questions afterwards, we'll be happy to explain those for you. All right. So as a quick review, anytime you see those 3 dots, that allows you to access the clerk edit tools, and you can edit the case information provided that you have the clerk admin rights, and that's where you're a court admin in e-file Texas. You can make case, filing, or document confidential with the clerk edit tools, and that will hide the element from the licensed attorney and registered user role. Okay. Research takes its information cues from e-file Texas. So if information is updated via e-file Texas, that update will also be reflected in Research Texas. And until you are integrated with Research Texas, the changes you're making in your CMS will not be reflected in Research. So even if your CMS is integrated with e-file Texas, Research Texas requires 2 additional APIs if you would like to notify Research Texas about case events to hide and, I guess, change case metadata. Okay. And expunctions, they are performed in e-file Texas, not in Research Texas. So the expunge case will be removed from Research Texas overnight. Let's go through that real quick. So there's a process to expunge. If you're in the integrated, expunging your case records will occur within your case management system as usual. So if you're integrated, you expunge that case, and then overnight, that case and all of its associated filings and documents will be removed from Research automatically. We do it overnight because it's an intensive process. We want to make sure there's not a lot of activity on the site. So expunge records will also be removed from e-file Texas. So not only does it expunge it from Research Texas, but it also expunges it from e-file Texas with you never being required to sign into either application. If you are in a repository model and not integrated, you will use the court admin function in e-file Texas to expunge that record as usual. So we've talked to some clerks that didn't know that this option existed, so we wanted to include this slide. Whenever you're signed in to e-file Texas, there's this court admin tab at the top here. And if you click on that, you'll have access to this expunge case tab. This is a right within e-file Texas, so if you don't have that, contact our support team and we can have that right added to you. So if you click expunge case, you'll be able to select the location where this case is in e-file Texas. If you do a quick search for its case number, you're going to see that it brought back some results. So I was doing an example here and found 2 cases that had the same number, for example, in the Supreme Court. So this is our stage environment. But if you were to click expunge case, we're going to give you another warning. Are you sure you want to expunge that? If you click yes, then the next day, that case will be removed from e-file Texas and from Research Texas. Okay. And finally, there is, yeah, thanks, Casey.
I was going to say, Matt, so this is the 3rd option that we've got on the screen, the manual option. Some of you are already taking advantage of this. If you send the order granting the expunction to OCA, then we can remove it manually. When we do it, it removes it from both e-file Texas and from Research, but be aware that it may take up to 30 days to get removed. And so the other 2 ways are much faster in doing that. The other thing I'll stress is that I know that our legal division says that sometimes they'll get notices that an expunction is coming, but not the actual order. And so just be aware that all they really need is the order granting the expunctions. And then you can email those to the email address that you see there, ocaexpunctions@txcourse.gov. Or if you like the paper-based world, you can send them to us here in Austin, and we'll take care of them there. So again, the other 2 ways are generally much faster.
Great, thanks, Casey.
Hey, also want to mention that as far as reporting goes, Research has a document sales report built into it, and that's accessible by clerks and clerk admins. It's on that three-dot menu that we looked at, or the three, we call it the hamburger menu. You click there, there's a document sales report. And that allows you to see all of the document sales that are happening within your court. And you can filter it by date. You can also filter it by location. And by default, it just shows you the most recent purchases all the way down to the oldest. And finally, you can also export this to a CSV or an Excel file if you would like to enter that into another case management system or send it along for reconciliation. Also, we'll be emailing a financial reconciliation report, which is daily, and that will be sent to the same recipients as the existing eFile Texas report. And if you would like to change those recipients, you can contact Tower Technologies, and we'll adjust those email addresses for recipients of this financial reconciliation report.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Sure. All right, so that is the overview of the changes within research. It looks like our question board has been cleared, so I think we are going to go ahead and continue on with the presentation and review the new redaction services that are now going to be implemented into the process in the very near future. So first, I think we've all seen a similar slide to what you are seeing here. This is going through on the left-hand side the different types of filers that can file in. In the second column you see there is the electronic filing service providers or any filing portal, which would also include the self-help .eFile Texas down at the bottom. You see the electronic filing manager, which is where the clerk's review, and that goes down into the bottom right where you see the clerk review with the number 2 on it. And then up at the top you do see research. And then over to the very far right you see all of the case management systems and how that gets imported in. What we are working with the OCA to deliver in the near future is redaction services, a 3-part or 3-faceted solution which would take place in 3 different locations. The first one in the EFSP model, any filing portal would have the ability to provide this service. The second one in the review queue, and as the clerks would have the ability to also have this service. And then finally, within research, if you were in a repository mode and upload those documents. What I want to do is spend just a little bit of time walking through each one of those 3 redaction points. And before we jump in to a little bit more information and do a demonstration of the solution. So the first redaction point is redaction at the time of filing. In this model, the filer is going to upload their document to an EFSP that's supporting the redaction solution. We are extending out the interface to allow for third-party commercial EFSPs to be able to use our redaction services. So it isn't just through the eFile Texas portal. It would be through any portal that chooses to do that. I do stress that chooses to do that because those EFSPs are not required to implement this service. It is really at their discretion. So those choosing to do that will, and those choosing to do that will not. Assuming that the filer is using one that chooses to offer this solution, then what the solution will do is identify those common personally identifiable information to be automatically redacted, and then provide that information back to the filer. So the filer can then review those redaction candidates that are identified by our redaction solution and then make any manual adjustments that are necessary. When the filer is ready, he or she will then complete the filing process by submitting the filing to the clerk, and both the original and the redacted copy would be sent to the e-filing manager for review. The second data point or redaction point here would be redaction during the clerk review. The normal cadence would occur here. The court would go through the review process by starting to review that envelope. The only difference is now you will see a highlighted version of that document where those highlights are identifying those redaction candidates that have been either A, automatically identified by the redaction engine, or B, manually identified by the filer. The court then can choose to do one of 2 different paths, and this would be very similar to what you experience with the filing community with electronic filings today, which is, if there are some changes that are needed to be made, so I know some clerks will make those changes on behalf of the file, accept them, while other clerks will always return it back for correction, conditioning that filing community member to do the right thing when submitting their filings. This will again be up to the discretion and your office's practices, but you will have the opportunity to make manual adjustments if you deem that action appropriate. At the time of acceptance, both documents will be transmitted to the case management system if it is an integrated model, and the CMS will have the ability to choose which documents they possess. We expect some CMS vendors to possess both. We expect some to just hold on to the redacted copy, but we will give your CMS vendor the ability to make that determination based on what your office's preferences are. The key point I think here is clerks are not required to redact or make manual adjustments. This is completely a discretionary task. If you would like to do that, you may. If you'd like to return it back for correction and have the filer go through that manual editing process to identify any candidates that were overlooked, you can certainly do that as well. The third data point or redaction point is during the manual upload process to SearchTX. When documents are manually uploaded by the clerk using the tools that Matt walked us through a little bit earlier, we can use the same process where the automatic redaction engine would identify those redaction candidates and provide that back for review. Research has the ability to show the different types of documents as we can. So for judges, we can show a unredacted copy, but for the role 4 and 5, the licensed attorney or the registered users, we can then display that redacted version. And so that'll be that third data point. Just talking real briefly about the targeted redaction elements here. Casey, I don't know if you want to review this since it covers Rule 21.
Sure. Yep. So what OCA has done in contracting with Tyler to do redaction is they're targeting the data elements that you would find in Rule 21C for sensitive data. So they're looking for those personal ID numbers, information on minors, and some of the count numbers. And so the one thing, again, that we need to stress is that this redaction service isn't going to guarantee, just because of things to where, you know, people could use handwriting that's really sloppy and the system may miss that. So it's not a guarantee that it's going to catch 100% of the sensitive data that's traveling through. And then I just want to make sure everybody understands that the rules have not changed. So the rules clearly state that the duty to redact is upon the filer. And so what these redaction services are is just yet another tool in the toolbox for the filers to be able to go in and try to catch some of that sensitive data.
Great. Thank you, Casey. I think it'd be a good opportunity now to actually demonstrate the redaction services. So with that, I'd like to pass the presenter mode over to April, and I don't see April on here. Is she logged in as Adam maybe? Let me check.
She is an attendee, not on staff.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So what I can do is go ahead and demo the redaction and research.
Okay.
And we can rustle up April. So what I'm going to do is change myself to be a presenter.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. So I'm just going to move a little bit closer to the phone. So like we just saw, the manual clerk tools will allow you to upload new documents into research. So what I went ahead and did is created this test filing here. What I'm going to do is act like I'm going to add a document like we saw before. And I'm going to select a PDF from my computer. And this time I'm going to select a Social Security number as document. So it's a test document and actually has some Social Security numbers on there, one of those redaction candidates that we're hoping the system will identify. So what's new is this redaction button. which is completely optional. If I want, I can hit that redact button, and then a new pane or window is going to open showing the progress of redaction. First it uploads it, and then it scans it looking for redaction candidates. And finally, when it's done, I see the green check mark, and then it tells me how many redaction candidates it found. So at this point, I have the ability to say, okay, I accept, or if you want, you can view and edit those redactions. By clicking view and edit, it's going to open a new window showing the document and the redaction candidates. So anything that it found that is highlighted, that is what the engine thinks I need or I'd like to redact based on those targeted elements. And then from here, you have additional manual tools to edit those. Say, for example, I wanted to say, actually, no, don't redact this. We say, hey, are you sure you want to delete this annotation? And at this point, no redactions have taken place yet. It's just identifying those redaction candidates. So I'm going to remove these. And then whenever I'm pleased, if you want, you can also use this redact tool, and you can manually redact things here. So what I'm going to do is click Save and Close, and then it's going to close that window. And whenever I hit OK, that's actually whenever the document is going to have those redaction candidates burned in. So that's what's happening right now. It's sending this document to Tyler Content Manager, which is one of our divisions, for the burning in of that document. And this is our test environment, so it's a little bit slower than you'll see in the stage and in production.
So Matt, while it's circling, we did have a question asking, is it going to highlight credit card numbers that are coming through? And the answer I can say is yes, it should.
Absolutely. It should be identifying credit card and bank account numbers, passport numbers. And whenever we send out this PowerPoint slide deck, you'll see those redaction candidates. Thanks, Casey. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that document, and it's going to open that document as usual. But you're just going to see our manual and automatic redactions were then placed there. So, yeah. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presenter back over to.
All right, and I'll open up the site. We've asked April, since we were having those technical difficulties, to come in here, and I'll ask that April use my computer to walk us through the redaction process within eFile Texas.
Thank you so much, Terry. So as you can see, I have already gone to the eFile Texas stage environment, and I am going to go find a case to file into so I can show you the process of redacting a document through the application. So I've already saved off 2 documents onto the computer here that contain specific data in those data elements that we talked about that are included in those elements that we're looking for. So what this is going to allow us to do is actually go through the process of identifying that that is happening. So I'm just waiting on my screen to open up and allow me to start filing into the case.
Hey, it looks like we have a question also from Kathy. How can it distinguish between names of adults and names of minors if not included in the style? So if a party that is a minor is included in the case metadata, so if it's listed as a child or a minor, then we will send that case information, that metadata, to the redaction engine to try to proactively scan and identify instances of that child's name, their address, and their dates of birth for redaction. But if that party's name is not mentioned in the case metadata, we're not currently looking for those scanning to see if that child is a child in that document using contextual clues. That's something we're looking to include in the future.
Yeah, and I was going to add to that, Matt, that yes, so that at some point in the future, most pleadings or things that come in will have a person's name listed with a date of birth that they can then use to say, oh, this must be a kid. Or they can also, in the pleadings where it says Casey Kennedy, comma, a minor, then they can use those contextual clues to pick up on that is a minor that needs to be redacted. Again, not available right this instant, but we're hopeful that it'll get there very soon.
Thank you, Matt and Casey. So I've gone ahead and started the process of filing just to keep moving us along. I've chosen my filing code and put in my description, and now I'm going to go upload the 2 documents that I have that contain these elements. And one of them is going to contain a number of different elements. The second document is simply going to be one element in multiple formats to show that we do have the ability to catch those elements kind of regardless of format. So I'm going to go ahead and upload both of my documents and choose my security. And then you'll see that I now have this auto redact button here that shows up that's going to go tell the system to auto redact this document. When I click that button, I'm going to get this dialog box that tells me it's okay to close this box down because it's going to notify me, as it did here, when the redaction on that document is complete. So each time you do that, it does notify you that you've started redaction on your document. You do also get the spinny icon here just to let you know that it is processing that. Once the redaction is complete, the filer has the ability to view and edit those redactions just to ensure that it did get all of the elements that they were looking for. So I'm going to open up my first document. It's going to open in the viewer, and it's going to show me all of the elements that the redaction software has identified as needing to be redacted. And as Matt had showed previously in research, it's the exact same screen. It does allow me to see each of those highlighted in red with those identifiers beside them. So you can see that we are identifying and redacting those items. As Matt had indicated, if I would like to remove the redaction on any one of those fields, I can do so by right-clicking and then clicking the delete icon and then pressing the delete button to confirm. So now I'm no longer redacting that. If I would like to add redaction where an element might have been missed because of handwriting or various other formatting, I can add those items back in. So I do get the ability to verify this. I'll hit save and close, and that's going to save my elements. And then it tells me that it's completed based on what I've done. Then I'm going to go look at my second document. And this is the one that's going to show me the items in the same number, social security numbers, in various different formats. So you can see that it's catching those both with different headers, different formatting, and so forth, spacing with and without headers on the screen. So just an example of being able to identify and mark those for redaction as needed. On each of the documents, as I stated, I'll have the ability to edit and modify these redactions, add additionals as needed before I save and leave the screen. Once I've confirmed all my redactions, then I would save my filing, just like always, and submit as needed. I'll choose my payment account. And then I'm going to summary and submit. The next step that we will do is jump over to the reviewer site and show what the redactions look like in the review queue for items that have already been sent through for redaction. So I'll open that site up. And I will log in.
While we're doing this, a question came up, I think, Jeff, if our implementation has multiple options under security, can other options besides contain sensitive data be treated as sensitive data for purposes of making the redaction available? I think I understand your question, Jeff, but I'll try to answer it as best I can, and if I don't, feel free to correct me on this. In the mapping of what the data security groups are in terms of contain sensitive data or does not contain sensitive data, those are the two that are defined by the state, but through your CMS, you should be able to map up any of your security groups in that case management system to one of those two categories. think that's what you're asking, but if not, feel free to elaborate. April's going to continue with the demo in the interim.
Fantastic. So I've logged into the review queue and identified an envelope that had been previously submitted for, with redaction elements in it, and I'm going to begin review on that. And as the reviewer, I am going to be able to see immediately when the page comes up on the screen what items or elements the filer has submitted as needing or as being redacted. So you can see this is the same document that we have used in previous demonstrations today. And you can see in my scenario here, the reviewer actually only suggested or selected to redact a few of the elements on the screen. And so in this scenario, you will be able to see that and identify it. If I look at the other document, I can see that all elements have been selected for redaction. So again, it's a visibility into what the filer has identified as needing to be redacted. As Terry mentioned earlier, of course, redaction on the clerk's part is an option. If you wanted, you would be able to redact the additional elements in this document, or you would have the option to send it back to the filer for them to correctly redact the document. If you did want to complete redaction and fix this for the filer, you do have an option here on the left-hand annotations pane to edit the redacted document. By clicking that icon, it is going to go ahead and open that same content manager that both Matt and I have used already today to identify the document. You can see the elements. If you do want to perform redaction for this filer, click the redaction icon here, and then you would go through and redact the additional elements that you want to see redacted. So if you wanted to leave the last four and these additional pieces here, you would be able to do so as needed. Once you have made the changes, you've confirmed that these are the items that you want to redact, you'll be able to hit save and close, and then it's going to update the document here on the screen. So now I can see which pieces are and are not going to be redacted. So for example, I left the last four unredacted. That would be an option left up to you if you did want to do this. So again, you do have the ability to redact in each of the documents as needed. And then once you have completed that and you're ready or to accept the filing, then you would just process the envelope as normal for your regular business process. So just condense, and it will move on like it normally does. As the filer, I will receive the redacted document back in my filing details, so I would be able to see the finalized redacted document once it processes through them. And I believe this is an example. So I can go to the transmitted copy and see that finalized version that ended up in the case management system with the redactions burned into the document as expected. So I do get that finalized stamped redacted copy back from the system once it has finished processing and transmitting and doing its business. And that is my demo.
Great, thank you very much, April. We're going to switch back over to the PowerPoint presentation and finish up. I think we're on the home stretch now. Casey, these are some important dates that we think are valid to share with this audience. Would you like to take this one?
Yep, sure. So the first one's the easy one on Halloween. If you like treats in the form of money, that's the deadline to get the bank information to Tyler. And as Terry said, they'll come out with a form, but a voided check or the bank letter will suffice for now if you want to jump in early with that. The important date is 11/1, and so that's the date that documents that once you start accepting documents on 11/1, those are going to be available for the Roll 5 registered user per the security matrix, of course. But those documents from that day forward will be available to registered users. Then on 11/7, which I believe is a Wednesday, that's when research on to the licensed attorney Roll 4 user Roll 5 as well. Then, as Terry mentioned earlier, in mid to late November, the redaction services will be turned on for the electronic filing manager for clerk review for the EFSPs and for research. And then in December, once research is off and running, you'll see additional promotional stuff promoting research to our attorney community to get them moving stuff as well.
Great. Thanks, Casey.
Terry, one of the questions that have come up already, Kelly was asking, are both versions sent to the CMS or just a redacted copy? And if both, which will be listed under our event to be viewed by our office? So I can answer the part of that each office can choose to just get the redacted version or to get the redacted in the original. But then Terry, you can answer the rest of that question.
Yeah, and the rest of it's going to be dependent upon your CMS on how you get that configured on which one you want to be able to be viewed by your office. So each CMS may do that a little differently. So we'll need to check with your CMS on how they're going to surface that within that system of record. There are a series of questions, so I'd like to just take this opportunity to go down them now, if that's okay, Casey.
Yeah, go ahead.
Cynthia asked a very valid question. If an attorney files an application for occupational driver's license and it has a DL in it, if it's redacted, then the judge won't be able to see it, correct? Absolutely. But the expectation is that the filer isn't going to send that through the redaction process. Again, it is optional, and they're entitled to do that if they want to, but again, they'll have to go through the process of eliminating that redaction candidate from that list during a manual review process if they choose to go through that process. It will identify that driver's license on that review, but we suspect that most filers will just simply not use the redaction process for that effort. Jeff, we've got your information. We'll tackle it offline as suggested. I think that there's I think we could talk through it a little bit better. Where do we send the voided check for bank information? We'll send that out, Vicki, so that you can send that in to us. We'll give you that email address as we send out where the location is for this presentation, so that you can find that. Jeff, your final question about can separate bank information be set up for each court location? Absolutely. This is just like eFile Texas. Each office we suspect will have different accounts, and we'll just need that information so that we can route the funds to the appropriate location. I think we've cleared the questions with the exception of Jeff in our offline dialogue on that other piece. So the last thing we want to end with before we open it up for more questions is if you'd like to get integrated with SearchTX, the very first step you need to do is contact your case management system provider and tell them that you'd like to. That'll initiate the process and we can get started from there. Given the timeline that we've got, obviously, the sooner the better on that. The second is evaluate your business processes. If you're choosing to continue on in that repository model, make sure you understand what steps need to be taken in that model and then how to perform those tasks. And then lastly, we'll be sending out some training materials on how to properly utilize the new redaction services through the system. We demoed them here, but we'll have some training documents that will give you step-by-step instructions on how to do that. We encourage you to review those when those become available. And that is it. We are going to pause now and see if we have any additional questions. If you do, feel free to send them in the questions box and we'll try our best to answer those here. In the meantime, we will pause for a quick sip of coffee and for you to have an opportunity to submit your questions. All right, the question that came up, will clerks have to manually secure management trust cases for minors? Casey, I don't know that security matrix that well on that one respective area. Do you know where that lied on that security matrix?
Yeah, let me pull it up on my screen so I can look at it. But I think this is the trusted settlement thing, but I'm not sure. Hold on.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up, dude. Management trust.
Okay.
next question while we're waiting on that, are criminal records eventually going to be online for research? Cynthia, right now that's not in the works, unless Casey knows anything different. The Supreme Court is
no. So the Court of Criminal Appeals right now, as you know, they're lagging behind with even e-filing. So I would imagine that at some point in time, sure, but at no time in the foreseeable future do I see criminal going on.
Great, thanks, Casey.
The main reason is just you can imagine where as much sensitive data as there is in the civil side, there's like 10 times the amount on the other side, on the criminal side.
Great. And then Kathy provided more context. She said management trust can be on a minor or an adult, and the courts don't file them differently. Jeff had another question, basic question regarding sensitive data filed by the filer as selected as such. If the filer selects the option as contain sensitive data, will that prevent the document from being viewed by roles 3 and 4? It should, but it's going to be dependent upon the model that you're in. If you're in a repository model, then the answer will be yes. If you are in a integrated model, it's going to be depending upon how you have that configured in your CMS and how you have it mapped up. I would suspect that everyone would have that mapped up appropriately, but yeah, obviously it is dependent upon how those integrations work.
Hey, Jeff, another thing about research, I mentioned before that it takes its cues from both eFile Texas and your CMS. So if a document goes into Research Texas from eFile Texas and it has the security setting of contain sensitive information, it's also marked as confidential or hidden from roles 4 and 5, which are the licensed attorney and the registered user.
Great, thanks, Matt. And then Kathy provided some additional context. Chapter 1301. Okay.
Yep. So I think these are guardianship management trusts filed under, well, either that or somewhere under probate. Right now, the only thing restricted in probate is guardianships for minors and the documents for adult guardianship, and then the documents from relief from firearms disability. So if again, in the e-filing world, if you take the case category and the case type that it gets filed under, and then under the security matrix, starting on page 23 of the JCIT standards, you can see what will be shown and what will not be shown. So in the event, if what Kathy is saying is that the courts filed the same thing, regardless of if it's a minor or an adult, I would encourage the filers to mark the ones with minors in them as sensitive data so that they don't come across research or that we see that. And then at the same time, I'm wondering if we can make a note. We can make a note of it, and I can bring it up to the standards committee that reviews this to see maybe they want to split those out between adults and minors in that piece.
Great, thank you. Looking through the questions here.
So Kathy's question, and I'm going to paraphrase it. What happens if if something doesn't get caught? So again, the rules clearly say that the filer is on the hook to redact any sensitive data. Obviously, if a clerk sees page 1 when they open it up to accept and can see, holy cow, you put all this stuff on there, you should return it for correction. But the courts don't expect clerks to go thumbing through hundreds of pages to look for sensitive data. If it's an issue of, okay, it's properly filed in the rules and says this contains sensitive data, and we see that it's not being carried over correctly to research, then that's something that we need to know about so that the research team can get that corrected. But again, ultimately, it's on the filer to redact, and then if it's properly redacted and marked, then it's up to us to make sure that research is honoring what e-file is giving it.
All right, thanks, Casey. Cynthia asked if we have a trust account such as on an accident, could that be considered a minor?
Yeah, so anytime you could have minors, if they're in the case meta information, we'll pick them up. If they're not, we won't necessarily see them right now, but we may in the future, given context clues. But again, that redaction piece is to the filer. They need to be able to, they have a duty today to go in and redact that without redaction services. And I'm thinking, Terry, when we do our attorney outreach later on, that we need to stress the fact that they're on the hook to do that. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and I'm just clearly written in the rules. We just need to spell that out for them.
Yeah.
Kathy, we got your note on splitting out those trust cases. Casey will note that if we share that with the, And then got it, Cynthia, about the settlement is for the minor trust account, not a guardianship.
Yeah.
All right. I don't see any more questions. Do you see any that we missed, Casey?
It doesn't look like it.
All right. I guess we will give you about another 30 seconds, and if we don't have any more questions on the board, then I think that'll do it for today. All right, Casey, any final closing thoughts as we depart?
Nope. Just to make sure that everybody's aware, we'll be taking the recording of this webinar, and OCA will more than likely host it on our YouTube channel, like we do a lot of all our other recordings. And we'll make sure that we get you guys a copy of this presentation. And then again, if it was so exciting that it's going to be given again. And the presentation on the 24th is the same as what you just saw. So there's no new information other than what you saw. But that's all I've got. Thank you guys for coming in.
Yeah, thank you, Casey, for the help. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, April, for the demos. And thanks for everybody for attending. Have a good day.